our 2020 Vision segment, well, let's kick it off with a couple of numbers for you. The Iowa caucuses are now just 20 days away, 20 the number there. Tonight at 9 on CNN, 6 Democrats will square off in the last debate before the first votes of the 2020 cycle, the Iowa caucuses. 6 candidates who will take the stage are on your screen right now. A few more numbers to share with you. 538 is out with its model showing the odds of each candidate winning a majority of delegates and hence the nomination. They put Joe Biden up top with 38% odds, followed by Bernie Sanders at 22%. No one at 15%. That would be the brokered convention scenario. Warren at 14%, Buttigieg at 10%. All the others are at 1%. By the way, we're going to be speaking with 538 founder Nate Silver tomorrow right here on RFL. Speaking of Iowa, the state's most recent poll shows just how tight the caucuses may be. All 4 of the top candidates are within 5 points of each other in the new CNN poll. That's when it comes to first choices of voters. But at a caucus, your second choice also matters because candidates have to meet a viability threshold in each caucus. So add in first and second choices, and Elizabeth Warren jumps to the lead, though it's really more of a 3-way tie with Joe Biden 5 points behind. And now let's bring in my next guest, Emily Tisch Sussman. She is a Democratic strategist and host of the podcast, Your Primary Playlist. Emily, you and I will both be watching tonight's debate, but more and more people, it seems, have not been. Viewership has been declining with each debate. Does tonight's debate matter? Who's the audience? Is it Iowa and maybe New Hampshire or beyond there?
It is beyond because people all over the country, even if they're not tuning into the debates, they're definitely checking out the coverage afterwards. We know that because candidates are seeing a barrage of online fundraising afterwards, depending on what the coverage has been saying about who did well. But I'd actually say primarily the audience tonight is Iowa caucus goers. They have been paying very close attention. When you talk to caucus goers in Iowa, you ask them, what are you weighing? Do you want them to see them in your local living room? Do you want to see them at the local diner? And a lot of them will tell you they've been tracking what's happening in the debates. So now this debate is a whittled down field. Candidates get more time, and it's on their home turf. It's going to be an audience of Iowa caucus goers. They're going to get to ask about questions that are specific to them. But also the most important piece is that still about 40% of Iowa caucus goers are undecided. They may have started with 5 choices of candidates and now they're down to 2, but that is still 2. So a lot of them are up for grabs.
In previous cycles, Iowa and New Hampshire have been essential. It's like the snowball that rolls downhill in terms of attention, media exposure, fundraising, that sort of thing. I'm wondering how much Iowa and New Hampshire will matter this year. It seems like their importance is being downplayed somewhat this year.
Somewhat. And I think the reason they've been downplayed is because of the early states, the 4 states that vote before Super Tuesday, they are majority white in their populations. Iowa is about 90% white. New Hampshire is just around there. And that really isn't reflective of the country as a whole or of the Democratic Party. So people are downplaying that a little bit also because many of the candidates in the race have so many resources, like they just have so much money that they can continue on past that. So I think that's particularly true for Sanders and for Biden. They have very large war chests. But I think if we're talking about the front runners here for Warren and Buttigieg, they really do need to show a strong performance in either Iowa or New Hampshire to be able to attract the kind of resources they need to play seriously in the next couple of states, which is Nevada and South Carolina, and then to go into Super Tuesday. And about 60% of the delegates will be allocated by the end of Super Tuesday. And Mike Bloomberg is playing very, very heavily, already putting over $150 million into advertising the air on those Super Tuesday states. So the dynamics this year are like nothing else we've ever seen before.
All the polling indicates a 4-way tie at the top in terms of Iowa. Any guesses on your end how it ends up, or would you not even want to offer a guess until seeing the debate tonight?
I don't think I'm that risky a gambler to try to put money in on any of those top 4. Look, I think it's very true. They are all in contention. Anybody could run away with it. When we say it comes down to ground game, what that really means is who has enough volunteers on the ground to make sure that the committed caucus goers to each and every one of the candidates actually shows up. With the caucus all being on one night, that means there's a lot of logistical challenges to actually get your supporters out there. Somebody may have work, their car may break down, they may have childcare, right? I just named a lot of people. So you have not only have to identify your supporters, you have to ensure they can get there and have to ensure they can stay for many rounds of counting. And that's what it really means when it comes down to ground game. They also have to have a high level of enthusiasm. Not only may they have to stay for hours, but the whole Iowa caucus is getting in a room and trying to get your neighbors to move over into your candidate's side of the gym or wherever the room might be. So people can be persuasive. So the level of commitment to a candidate matters a lot.
Yeah, anyone who's never participated in or watched a caucus taking place really owes it to themselves to do so. Back to the debate tonight. Everybody's been talking about the end of the truce between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. I'm wondering if you expect fireworks between the two of them tonight, and also, are those fireworks helpful? They do contrast the candidates, but so many Democrats just want somebody who can beat Donald Trump. They got to be cringing every time they see Democrat on Democrat violence in the debates.
Look, that the number one issue for any Democratic voter in the country, any state, is they want a candidate who can defeat Donald Trump. Every candidate has been offering their version of why they are the one to build the coalition to be able to do that. And look, every candidate is right. Donald Trump only won by 77,000 votes over 3 states. That is an extremely small margin. So everybody does have a theory of change. And voters right now are trying to decide which theory they buy into. They care about that more than they care about which ideology lines up with their own. This has been the only place that's been slightly different is with the extremely dedicated Bernie Sanders supporters who do believe in a very strong theory of change and therefore have stuck with him from the 2016 primary until now and stay committed. For that reason, Warren has been very reticent to go after him because she does believe that she has a strong enough theory of change with a little something extra to be able to bring some of his supporters over. And that has turned out to be somewhat true, but she needs to attract even more supporters over if she wants to become the nominee. He has been going more on the attack on the trail in the last couple of weeks. And in the last 24 to 48 hours, we saw a story come out that when the two of them met to talk about the fact that they were both going to be running, they had come to a truce to say they wouldn't attack each other, but he also said that he did not believe a woman could be president. That hits a nerve with a lot of not just Warren supporters, but women in the country in general. So I do expect us to see it come up, at least during the debate. Whether or not they take the bait, I think, is really still up for grabs. I'm not sure they're going to. But they've been doing it on the trail. They're trying to contrast themselves more with one another and stand out.
You know, Emily, you mentioned both electability and ideology, and I want to ask you about the intersection of those two, because one of the dominant themes of the campaign so far has been the split or perceived split between the progressive and the moderate branches of the party. Now, I know you think that ideology matters less to voters than electability, but isn't ideology a facet of electability? I mean, one of the big knocks on Warren and Sanders has been that they might not be electable because of their ideology.
It certainly has been a factor that people talk about. But when I say that ideology matters less to voters than electability, what I mean by that is that people are willing to say, yes, those might be some great ideas, that candidate might be some great ideas, but I'm not sure this is the moment for it. And the downside, if we have a candidate that is particularly too progressive, but that can't defeat Donald Trump, well, then our alternative is sticking with Donald Trump, and that's not really an acceptable outcome. So for that reason, people are still very undecided about what kind of candidate they want to support this cycle. They really do prioritize someone they can defeat Donald Trump. And so whereas it's a little bit easier for us from a distance to be able to say voters either fit into a Sanders, Warren, progressive camp or a Biden, Buttigieg, moderate camp, that's actually not really the reality for a lot of voters. They, especially in these early states in Iowa, New Hampshire, they get to have firsthand contact with the voters and many voters with candidates, and many voters are going to many different candidate events to check them out, to meet them, to see if they vibe, to see what they think. And so voters may end up deciding between Warren and Buttigieg or Biden and Sanders, which may not make a lot of ideological sense from the outside. But since they do get such contact with them and they are prioritizing this issue of electability, that's where a lot of voters are right now. And it's still 40% who are undecided just in Iowa.
We will see something new in tonight's debate that we haven't seen before, and that is the ascendancy of foreign policy as a key plank in the campaign, thanks to the strikes against Iran and the tensions with that country. Is Joe Biden the only Democrat on the stage poised to naturally benefit from that? Is there an opportunity for other Democrats to establish foreign policy credentials that voters may not have seen before? I assume we're going to hear about this a lot tonight.
I think we can safely assume that we will. All the Democrats stand aligned in saying that they would oppose where Trump has gone, both with isolationism and foreign policy, and particularly pulling out of the Iran deal. What they think they would do now instead, even before the tensions with Iran, have been vastly diverging depending on where they stand ideologically. Joe Biden does have the longest history on foreign policy. He has deep connections with a lot of foreign leaders, so we can expect him to raise this. But we can equally expect Pete Buttigieg to raise foreign policy because he's the only veteran who's going to be on the stage tonight. He's the only person who served abroad. Although I do think it ends up being a little bit of a vulnerability for him because it reminds voters his age, how young he is and inexperienced. But I think that we can expect him to lean very heavily into his military service here. I think another thing that we can expect is that we expect Sanders to try to attack Biden on his 2005 vote to authorize the Iraq War, which he's been doing consistently on the trail and brought up in the last debate. Biden didn't really engage with him, and it's proving to be a base motivating issue for Sanders, but not so much reaching voters outside of the hardcore Sanders supporters. It just doesn't really seem to be penetrating as an issue. I think a lot of voters feel like we talked about the Iraq War vote in 2008, in 2012. Biden has since said he made a mistake on that vote and no longer agrees with it. And that's kind of seems to be where voters are as well.
I want to ask you about a candidate who's not going to be on the stage tonight. That's Michael Bloomberg, who is waiting for Super Tuesday, although he's up to 5th place, as you noted, thanks to the spending in his ads, but he's not in the debate. Also, an article in the Washington Post today talking about how he's campaigning to win and to reshape the party at the same time. I wonder, do you like his chances to do either? And should he be in these debates if he's in 5th place?
I got to tell you, I think Michael Bloomberg's either totally crazy or not crazy at all. I think that we're still kind of seeing how that plays out. I think that he's less well known around the country than people, particularly in New York, think that he is. A lot of nostalgia for him in New York. So I think the fact that he's coming in with a lot of biographic kind of ads is the right move for his campaign. But I think we have yet to be seen if people think that it's a good idea for him to be jumping into the race without even competing in the first four states. He's not even trying to be in the first 4 states before Super Tuesday. He's not even trying to be in the debates because one of the criteria is how many individual donors you have donating to your campaign, and he's not taking donations at all. So he's totally foregoing the debates. I think people are a little bit all over the map as to whether that seems okay and they ultimately just want someone who could spend big and defeat Trump, or whether they think that he should be participating in it. I think we really don't know yet. Yes, he is polling higher than I think someone would expect, someone who just jumped into the race. But a lot of that could have to do with immediacy and name ID that they just saw him. So I think it's still yet to be determined.
I also think primary voters probably need an opportunity to compare and contrast in a debate. Finally, Cory Booker dropped out of the race this week. Now, the top 4 candidates in Bloomberg are certain to stay in. Steyer and Delaney not in the debate tonight. They can go as long as they want to keep spending their own money. Who's in real jeopardy? Who's in danger of dropping out? Who's facing make or break tonight and in the coming days?
Well, the person who clearly has the most on the line here is Senator Amy Klobuchar. She has qualified for the debate. She's seen an influx of fundraising that's kept her in the race over the last couple of debates by really doubling down on her, folksy Midwestern roots and her moderate lane. And that has been doing very well for her. She still does not have anything near the war chest to compete with the others who are still in the race. But so she clearly has the most on the line here to see how far she'll be able to go. Look, we could definitely end up with a brokered convention, meaning that we're not going into the Democratic convention in July with one clear candidate. And then if there is a candidate that was able to rack up delegates in early states like Iowa and New Hampshire, well, they sure go into that convention with a lot of leverage to either try to position themselves as a vice presidential pick or just to have be in a position of power in decision making in the general election. So she does have every incentive to stay in, even if it doesn't look like she's going to get the nomination at this point.
Emily Tisch Sussman is a Democratic strategist and the host of the podcast Your Primary Playlist. Emily, terrific stuff. Can't wait for you to come back on. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much. See you soon.
And up next, the shifting story on the Iran strike. President Trump now says the reason he ordered it doesn't even matter. After the break, a retired Marine Corps officer joins us to weigh in.